Right now to the big breaking news of the day involving ICE enforcement in Maine. Senator Collins' office has just released the news that that ICE operations are ceasing in Maine, or at least the enhanced operations. She says this comes after direct communication between her and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Collins says that means there are no current ongoing or planned large-scale ICE operations in the state. It's not clear exactly what that means for what the Department of Homeland Security announced as Operation Catch of the Day, targeting 1,400 people in the state. We will keep you updated, as we get more clarity on this. And to help us do that, our Phil Hirschkorn has joined us this morning. First of all, thank you so much for getting up early and coming in at the last minute.
Early bird gets the worm, right?
Yeah, well, this is a big worm.
Before 6 a.m. and we got it on TV, and we are talking about it still.
This is big news. What can you
seems
tell
that
us
way,
about
doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Well, I want to, you paraphrase the senator's statement, which she's released publicly. There's a but in there, just so everybody's clear. But normal ICE operations will continue. So, it's not like there aren't going to be immigration arrests in Maine anymore. But this surge of the last, week to 10 days, where we've been told more than 200 people in Maine have been arrested. We don't know who they are. We don't really know what most people have been charged with or why they've been arrested. That's been part of the problem, right, for the last 10 days. But regular operations will continue, Senator Collins says. But yes, this is, big news that her calls to Senator Noem have resulted in this pause in operations. Maybe a pause in the surge, maybe there will be a withdrawal of extra ICE agents that are in town. And I guess my mic's not working. We're going to make it work. More to come, as you said in the initial top of the newscast. Here's what's interesting. So many things are interesting. Yeah. First of all, this is why it wasn't working. Lee, my mic wasn't on. There it is.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, now you can have your mic back, and I can have my mic back. I like how it's more casual on the streaming show than in the broadcast. We're like up to the second.
If you need to do a wardrobe change too, feel free.
Well, I'm not going to do that on camera.
You've seen this show. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
I have done this before. I know you're supposed to turn your mic on. But anyway, this very serious situation. We're not in Minnesota. We haven't had quite the street protests yet, and certainly we haven't had the violence. That's been the good news. But we've had this upswing of arrests, more than 200. We know very little information. Our governor knows very little information. Our attorney general knows very little information. Our senators, including Senator Collins and Senator King, up till now have known very little information. They've been basically blown off when they ask for information. But Collins is the only Republican in the delegation, right? It's a Republican administration. She voted to confirm Kristi Noem as Homeland Security Secretary. That was very controversial, right? Noem was one of the 5 most controversial cabinet picks, right? There's Robert Kennedy Jr. Health, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Health. Put that aside. She voted for him too. There's Kash Patel at the FBI. She voted against him. There was Pete Hesgeth at Defense. She voted against him. But she voted for Noem. She voted for Tulsi Gabbard to be Director of National Intelligence. And she voted for most of the other cabinet picks. So, was this a trade-off to have access when things got hairy? I don't know. We'll have to hear Collins talk about this more in the coming days. But it's very interesting because she told us earlier in the week that she had asked for this pause. And so that's a pretty quick turnaround. That was just 2 days ago.
Well, I think that's the thing that's the most surprising to me is that we hear all the time about our delegation advocating for Maine in different ways. I don't think in my 30 plus years of doing this job I've ever seen a turnaround quite this quick on something that the administration seemed to be digging its heels in deeper and deeper on as we went along. I think that's the surprising part to me.
Right, and I think you have to look at the context of what's going on in Washington right now. Today on the Senate floor, they're going to begin voting on the annual DHS, Department of Homeland Security, appropriations. Who's the chair of the Appropriations Committee? Susan Collins. What is Susan Collins laser focused on? Getting all 12 cabinet department appropriations bills through the Senate this week. The House already passed the DHS appropriations last week. Jared Golden, one of 7 Democrats, our congressman up in the Northern District of Maine, voted for it. And Collins has been very insistent that it would be a disaster, her word, if the DHS bill didn't pass. It wouldn't pass all 12 because remember that little government shutdown we had in the fall?
That.
We talked about that a little bit. 43 days, 2 months. And when they reopen government, they funded it only through January 30th. Well, when's that, Lee? Is that Saturday? Is that tomorrow? Tomorrow? So they are, on the treadmill scrambling to get all those appropriations bills passed so government can stay open. There's a lot of jockeying going on. So some people are saying, fire Kristi Noem. Governor Mills said that again yesterday. Graham Plattner, who's running against her for Senate, and is planning a rally this morning.
So, I was going to bring that up. Like, do you think this coincides with any of that? I mean,
tell them where the rally is.
Right, it was supposed to be outside of her office, Senator
right
Collins'
down the
office.
block in downtown Portland, where some other protesters got arrested yesterday for this, or a couple days ago for the same reason. Right. So, I don't know that added to her urgency. I actually think that was probably just a nuisance that he was going to be having one of his crowds on the street. He gets large crowds, saying not only should Noem go, he actually said in a video on X this week that if the appropriations pass, Susan Collins will have blood on her hands, Graham Plattner said, referring to the fact that what ICE did in Minnesota, and if we fund ICE, that was his complaint. So maybe it's that. I think it's really more she's focused on getting the appropriations bill passed. And what's happening is there's jockeying going on, compromising. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader from New York, my former senator, is negotiating with the White House to make some changes, such as no more maskless, no more masks rather on the agents, right? They must wear body cams. This idea of warrantless intrusions into homes, that's not going to fly. So they're pushing very hard to put some of these reforms, the Democrats are, into the bill. People like Angus King are on that side. Obviously, he's independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats, and he's been telling us for the last week he wants these reforms as well. Otherwise, he's not going to vote for the bill.
So that's the political side of it, right? Let's talk about the human side of it. Not that politicians aren't humans. I mean, that's debatable as well. But there's people who aren't going to work, Phil. There's people who aren't sending their kids to school, right? There are people who are stuck and they're scared and they're inside their homes because ICE is here and they're worried, even if they're completely legal, that it won't matter and they're going to get taken. Does this hour ago announcement let everybody take a breath here and maybe get back to their lives?
I think people in southern Maine particularly would hope that. I mean, there was an extraordinary roundtable yesterday with Governor Mills, with our Attorney General Aaron Frey, with 6 mayors, not quite the 6 top cities, but pretty close: Portland, South Portland, Lewiston, Auburn, Biddeford, and I'm forgetting one.
Westbrook, I think.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Westbrook, where that other TV station is. And so that's where those have all been hubs of ICE activity, like you're saying, people not sending their kids to school, people afraid to go to the grocery store, people staying home from work. Mayor Dion of Portland brought up the fact that estimates are that hundreds of people could be at risk of eviction in the coming weeks because if they're not earning their money or if the breadwinner's been arrested, how are they going to pay their rent? So been a lot of concerns about that. And, we certainly quizzed our Attorney General, Aaron Frey, about this. People who have a work permit, people who are an asylum seeker, technically, legally, they're in status. They're not illegal. The administration seems to see it differently because anecdotally, we are hearing of people who have work permits who've been arrested at their place of work, asylum seekers. They might be here for years. They might have even entered the country illegally. But if they have a pending asylum application, you're not supposed to touch them. And that may be frustrating. It's probably frustrating to people on both sides of the immigration enforcement debate. But that's the reality. That's the legal reality. And that's what's so concerning about this surge for so many people, that if you think you're doing the right thing, you're in the process. Attorney General told me that he's heard stories of people who are going to their appointment, that next step to the path to citizenship or a green card or whatever, and then they're getting arrested. That's happening all over the country.
And that's the argument that Cumberland County Sheriff Kevin Joyce was just making last week about his employee that was in the middle of doing all the right things, and this shouldn't have happened to him,
and was supposedly going to an appointment for the next step in the legal process, and that's when he got picked up. My understanding is, though, that there's no announcement of any change in Minnesota, right?
Right, and many more agents, 3,000. We don't know how many are here. Obviously, the 2 deaths, that's terrible. That's what everyone's talking about, and what seems to have made the administration make a slight turn in its tone and approach. But no withdrawal in Minnesota has been announced. The president has talked to Governor Walz. They had a positive phone calls, as they both described it. a day or two ago, and hopefully things will simmer down in Minnesota. But the operation, no, has not been paused in Minnesota as far as we know.
Speaking of that, we're all parents of teenagers or young adults. I don't know if your kids came home yesterday from school speaking about this Friday march and Ice Out, it's called.
Don't go to school, don't go to work.
Correct.
Don't.
In support of Minnesota and Minneapolis and what's going on over there. Indirectly, what's going on here too. Basically, the kids are going to walk out of school. That's the plan. People are not going to go to work. That's the plan. And apparently there's a large rally scheduled for Monument Square. There's a lot of things here. First of all, with this announcement from Senator Collins, do you think that changes anything on that front? For starters, we start there, and then maybe get into the angle of being a parent of teenagers that are asking to do something like that and go down that path.
Well, we'll all have to ask our kids, won't we? Is the rally on? It's like with Graham Plattner at 8:30 this morning. You're still going forward with it, Graham. I think the answer will be yes, because nothing's going to be resolved by Friday.
Right.
I mean, again, this debate about whether we continue to fund DHS at its current level, whether we being the government in Washington, impose reforms that change some of the practices that really bothered people, like the masks and not wearing body cameras. And the one other thing we haven't talked about, which is happening to teenagers and many others who are trying to document tailgating, literally, ICE agents coming up to their car window, not so nicely. There's the one video that a lot of people have seen on social media where, I'm paraphrasing, the ICE officer says to a woman, we've got a nice little database, right? And I've seen another video, I think the Portland Press-Herald actually published this video yesterday, where ICE agents approached a man and said, you're obstructing an investigation. And he quoted the federal statute and said, you can be arrested for that if you keep following us. And they walked away and he said, thank you. So, I've told my teenage daughter who lives in Portland, look, if you see something, maybe don't take out your phone and film it. I'm not saying you don't have a right to do that. We all know what the First Amendment is, but you also saw what happened in Minnesota. And some people have been arrested for obstruction. Hundreds of people, members of Congress. One great example in New Jersey, a congresswoman was arrested for obstruction. She's being prosecuted because when she was visiting in an ICE facility, she got into a verbal confrontation, a little bit of scuffle there with some other elected officials. So that is happening. I think teenagers need to be careful. Will they still rally on Friday? I bet they will. They rallied before at City Hall, if you remember, before the Maine surge started in solidarity with Minnesota and other places. So I think the teens will do it. I think Plattner will still do it because the argument's not over. And even if this surge really has ended, as Susan Collins said, well, I think pause is the word, right? She's very careful with her words. It's a pause. It doesn't mean the war is over, right? So
it's like the ceasefire in Israel.
Ceasefire.
I mean, it lasts like 30 minutes,
Well,
who knows?
Politically, let's go backwards for a second. Let's just assume this is true and everything happens as the statement says it will and things go back to normal around here. This is a win for Senator Collins, and I feel like we're going to hear a lot about this once campaign season comes back around. And I'm not presuming that was her motivation, but she's going to get a lot of positive traction if this is to have a role in this.
what do you mean when campaign season comes back? I think we're in it.
Yeah, I forgot.
In fact, after
Have you seen our commercials?
After Governor Mills made her State of the State speech on Tuesday night, we got kind of the first official campaign press release from her official campaign spokesman, giving us all the bullet points where Governor Mills had erred in their view. But yes, clearly this is going to be, if this holds, a talking point for Senator Collins, where she talks about her seniority, her being the lone Republican, her access. If this appropriations bill passes, especially with reform, some of which she says she supports, like she's pointed out in recent days, look, there's millions of dollars in here for de-escalation training. There's millions of dollars in here in the bill as it was for body cameras, which for some reason ICE agents don't wear. I guess they're being filmed so much, maybe they don't need to wear them. But that's the standard issue equipment for police officers all over the country, right? So, she wants some of these reforms also. Now it's going to get caught up in this parliamentary, mess in Washington. Will it pass? Will it pass by Friday? Will a shutdown be avoided? But yes, if all of that is smooth sailing, Lee, I think you're right. This will be a bragging rights kind of thing for her in the campaign that is underway.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your
I love
analysis,
having you on here,
Phil.
man.
Yeah.
I
Thanks,
could
Phil.
talk to you
That was
forever.
fun.
This guy's
Sure.
an encyclopedia.